Hello, my fellow Westorians. Welcome back to our recurring Saturday live streams at a time of day that we hope reaches a lot of different people. I know it's hard, a lot of times kind of hard for people who are either on the west coast of the US or in Europe to make some of our time. So we try to mix it up a little bit by doing different days. So hopefully there's a nice group of people here today. We're excited to talk to y'all. We've got a fun topic planned.
Usually we have mean groups of people.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we try to cultivate around here. We want to have the cruelest sub-fandom within the genre, right? That's how we do it. So for the most part, the story, meaning A Song of Ice and Fire, the story, begins at Winterfell. We're introduced to the crypts in Ned's first chapter. Robert's like, straight for the crypts. He's like, hey, everybody, good to see you. Now let's go to the crypts. Bran takes us on a tour around the old parts of the castle right away, or almost right away, looking down on the new parts of the castle while exploring the old and seeing people active and doing their thing. We see the Godswood, we see the pools, we hear about the hot water piping through the walls. Lots of other fun details are spread out amongst the early chapters. But they also start leaving right away, right? Ned and Sansa and Arya leave, and they plan on taking Bran with them. And, of course, Jon heads to the wall. They say they must always be a Stark in Winterfell. And that's both a concept in the story, like in-world, and something that has some historical significance, as well as, there's a time when there are no Starks in Winterfell, which is what we're here to talk about today. At the end of Clash of Kings, there's no Starks in Winterfell. Bran and Rickon, they just leave. Their Winterfell's been burned, partly destroyed. They managed to hide in the crypts. So in this episode, we're going to look at the past that led the Starks away from Winterfell, ending with Bran and Rickon, starting with Sansa and Arya. And mostly we're focusing on the kids here. So we're going to look at the similarities in their journeys and how they deal with being hunted and commoditized and, valued for their claim, which is kind of what I mean by commoditized, or both, right? And all the different things they have to do, like changing their identity or pretending to be someone they're not. But anyway, so we'll get into all of that. I think it's going to be a really fun topic. And, well, it's good to have you back, Sean.
Good to be back.
This topic was your idea. And you're doing your read, and you're right at the you're kind of early in A Storm of Swords. This is right around the time where this is very just happening.
Yep.
So give us a few thoughts on where you're at.
I'm a few chapters into the third book, and it's still kind of crossing. I remember there was even a foreword. George kind of reminds the audience, like, hey, the timing. Some chapters last 3 weeks, some last 3 hours, so sometimes it's not exactly perfectly chronological. So there's some things happening in the beginning of the third book that are chronologically before the end of the second book,
Right.
A little bit of a blur. And there was a big gap between the second and third books too. So I can see why he might need, kind of like if your TV show after a year, there's like a previously on last season, whatever,
True. That's a good point. Yeah.
But that's, I even wonder how much George had it worked out in his mind. If that was like, I'm going to make them all leave Winterfell. You know what I mean? I wonder if that was like a plan from the get-go.
Yeah. I think it was. Well, based on his original plans, it seemed like, because he also had planned for Winterfell to be burned in the original. It was going to be Tyrion who did it, though. So, kind of a little bit of change from what he originally planned. Ramsay took that role on.
Certainly there can be a lot of changes in his plans as he goes, but it's also clearly there's a focus on the Starks and the kids. That's they're all except for Rob are POVs in the beginning.
Yeah,
and it seems it wouldn't be an exciting story if they all just stayed there. You know what I mean? They got to go off on adventures, and in fact that was one thing that was really like stood out in my mind, particularly how much Arya chapters just seem like D&D adventures. She's like, all right, we got to get a horse and a dagger and a map, and let's go on our, head out, and
they're not exactly sure where they're going.
Yeah. So it's something I remember thinking a long time ago, like not quite in terms of like them all leaving Winterfell, but in terms of how the Stark kids all had these naive ideas about what they wanted, and on different levels kind of got it, and it wasn't really what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what they wanted kind of included leaving Winterfell. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Arya didn't specifically actively want to leave Winterfell, but she didn't want to just be a lady knitting dresses.
She definitely didn't want to do that,
right?
Yeah.
She wanted to go off and with a sword and a bow and arrow like her
Yeah.
brothers, and she's probably not going to stay at home for that, right?
Yeah, when they're traveling south, she's off like exploring all the different places. Sansa was riding and kind of staying close, but Arya was out. There's kind of a contrast there, yeah.
And my thoughts here might bounce around a little bit, but John wanted to go to the wall again. Very naive. He doesn't even know what it means to go to the wall.
Yeah.
When I was 18,
I'm ready to go to the wall.
Yeah, when I was 18, graduated high school, joined the army. I didn't really understand what that meant at that age.
Yeah.
It's hard to be too judgmental. In fact, Sansa takes a lot of negative press for what she did as a 13-year-old girl. I know as an adult man exactly what I would have done with all the hindsight and knowledge about all the other timelines and characters. I can't believe she messed it up,
Yeah, and as one of the things we pointed out at the beginning of our reread is how much John is just as arrogant as Sansa about a lot of things. Just he's doesn't have quite the level of privilege she has, but still way more than almost everybody else, and how similar they are early on.
A lot of times people try to present her as like this whiny little girl. John's kind of whiny too. Arya's kind of whiny too. They're all a little bit spoiled.
They're kids.
They're all a little bit naive. They're all a little bit self-centered or whatever. I don't mean to be too judgmental. It's not them, kids in general.
Yeah, that's normal. That's exactly. You're not criticizing. You're calling them kind of normal in a sense.
Right. And even you can also have elements of naivete or self-centeredness and still be bold or kind or
true. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the essence of how George likes to write characters. They're not all perfect. They're not all good guys all the time. They're mostly good guys, and there are people who are, there's the grayness of everyone.
But Sansa wants to be a princess. She wants to go marry the prince. Well, she's not staying in Winterfell for that.
Yeah, that's true. It's hard to do that there.
Bran, I feel like it maybe at least actively wanted to leave.
He was excited to go. He wanted to, meet the King's Guard and see all those knights. But
but he's not even really old enough to be bored with home yet, right? And he's still climbing around the walls. And Rickon doesn't have any kind of agency or desire.
Yeah, we don't.
Or if he does, we don't see it. He's too young to really.
He was not happy that everybody left, but he's too young to be a POV or anything like that. Yeah.
Now Robb does not want to leave, right? If he's going to follow in his father's footsteps. Now, it's also hard to know what Robb really wants. Like, we don't get his POV,
right.
A. And B, he, more so than the other characters, is being pruned for a certain position.
Yeah.
Like, I guess maybe Sansa is on par with him for like whatever she might have really wanted. She's just not going to get. She's being set up for something.
She kind of wanted what they wanted for her. That's why she's kind of like the good girl in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Is because she wants already the thing she wants or what her family wanted her to do in the first place.
But would she still want those if she wasn't raised?
Probably
thinking
maybe
that was
not.
what she's supposed to do.
Yeah, like Aria was raised to want that, and she didn't. So she's the black sheep in that sense.
And I feel like the other characters all did have to kind of change who they were, like you said, once they do leave and things aren't happening like they want, whether they have to like actually change some piece of their character or pretend to be something different.
Yes.
Robb doesn't.
Yeah, he sort of does. It's more like
he's supposed to marry the Frey girl. He's like, no, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm not going to conform or adjust to the world around me. Or
in a sense, he does. He sort of kind of does conform in one way and doesn't in another. You know what I mean? Like he conforms to his sense of honor or her sense of honor, but he doesn't conform to the importance of maintaining these commitments that you make in front of everybody like that. Yeah. So it's kind of which is when he chose to be himself, it became a problem.
And that's another argument I make defending Sansa is that, everyone else has a horse and a sword and they're running around getting revenge and, maybe they're not exactly what they wanted or not exactly happy, but they're not literal prisoners like Sansa,
Yeah.
And so I like to give her a little extra credit for managing her position.
So let me jump in here and just take care of a few other bits before we go any farther. I think this is a really good start to an idea of what we're going to be talking about, but a couple of other bits we want to announce before we get too deep in here. Thanks to the patrons who make our show possible. Thanks to Jeff Gnarly the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' First Sword, and to Laenys the Talon, King of Gagossos, rider of Telarius, the red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of Midnight Black. We have a giveaway that we're doing in this episode. We'll be collecting emails from folks who are going to Ball at the Wall. If you want to go to Ball at the Wall, if you're planning on going, or if you're on the fence, and if a free ticket would help you, well, that's what we're doing. We're giving away a free ticket to Ball at the Wall. It's Nashville, October 26th. And it's kind of basically it's a Game of Thrones costume ball, kind of what it sounds like. Although it won't be as cold as a Ball at the Wall would be. This is Nashville. It won't be freezing cold like the Wall is. So we'll be there. Sean unfortunately won't be, but Ashay and I will be there, and it should be a lot of fun. There'll also be Sam Coleman, aka Young Hodor, Triple Crown cosplay, Azor Hype, and some other cool people as well. A lot of the Con of Thrones folks.
To be clear, how weird. I was trying to talk and my microphone is not working.
It's not working at all?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, Ashay's microphone is not working. In that case, then I will continue. So what you do is email Westeros History Giveaway at gmail.com if you want to go to Ball at the Wall. And we will announce the winner after the mid-roll. So email right now. This is only available to people watching this live. Also, want to announce that Ashaya will be on I Know That Nerd. That's tomorrow, Sunday, as in Sunday the 27th, I believe that would be. And that is going to be Ashaya on, I'm sorry.
It's the 29th.
29th, yeah, 29th.
Living in a past.
Yeah, I'm adding, I subtracted a day instead of adding a day. That is Steven Starks' channel. I Know That Nerd is a really wonderful name for a channel. He does interviews, and Ashaya is going to be his interviewee this time around, so that should be really cool. You can send questions in to Steven to ask Ashaya. He also sent us a super chat. That is Steven Stark. He said, "I wish I could stay, but I'm playing D&D right now. I'll be watching after we finish. Ashaya is the best." Indeed, she is. Even when her microphone isn't working properly.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for that, Steven, and enjoy your D&D game. I know a lot of our listeners are fans/players of D&D. I don't play right now, but I played when I was really young. I've thought about getting back into it, but I haven't. Do people play D&D up at the game store that you manage?
Oh yeah. In fact, a little anecdote I've taken note recently. I think there's like a new wave of D&D players because of Stranger Things.
Oh yeah.
Like it clicked in my mind. There was like one table playing D&D that looked like pretty much around 40-ish year olds, and another table playing D that looked like around 16-ish year olds. And I bet I know one group used to play when they were 16, and one group started playing because of Stranger Things. You know?
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it seems to be it's just really popular these days in general. It's cool. I like how big it's gotten. There's a lot of D&D podcasts out there, which even my sister has one. Yeah, a lot of people are into that. It's cool. So, I of course, you're aware of a lot of what happens in the books, even things that you haven't read. So we're not going to be too specific to, we don't want to spoil you any more than you already are. But, at the end of A Dance with Dragons, there still aren't any Starks in Winterfell. That's the point that things are at.
What?
Yeah, right.
I can't believe you're spoiling that for me.
Yeah. So, and there are no chapters at Winterfell, POV chapters at all in Winterfell, in A Storm of Swords, or A Feast for Crows, which is something I think a lot of people didn't realize. There's lots of those chapters in Game of Thrones and Clash of Kings, and then there's a bunch in A Dance with Dragons, but none in A Feast for Crows or Storm of Swords. Kind of neat, right? But no, so in the show, we one thing we can do for fun is compare a few things to the show and guess maybe what we think might happen. I guess you could say Jon and Sansa return to Winterfell kind of at the same time, right? They beat Ramsay at the Battle of the Bastards on the show, and then they go back kind of like, hey, we're back to Winterfell. So one thing I'm wondering is that will it go that way in the book? Since, I know as much as you do as far as that goes, even though you haven't read A Dance with Dragons, even that plot line hasn't advanced to that point yet. So we don't know which Starks will get back into Winterfell. Presumably they will. Maybe they won't. That would be quite a twist. No, it's a pretty safe assumption that they will. But it could be a lot different, because of course the fake Aria in the show is real Sansa, right? So that's one big difference. Maybe it won't be Sansa, but maybe it still will be. You know, she still comes north with the Vale army. That's entirely plausible for the books. So we want to, I guess you could actually say, technically Rickon gets to go back to Winterfell before Sansa and Jon.
Yeah.
But that's not really.
Yeah. There must always be a Stark Winterfell. Get in a dungeon.
It's kind of a hostile return. So we're not really, we're talking about a friendly Winterfell. So that's an interesting question. I'd love for people to weigh in the chat with what you think will happen, if anything different or not. If you think it'll be pretty similar. If you guys think Rickon will have a similar fate, curious about all that. But for now, what I want to get into is the main thrust of at least the first half of this podcast will be questions of identity. Like you said, they had things they wanted to be, but then there's kind of what you are and what you want to be aren't always the same thing. And it's, you know, like you said, it's something that all young people do. They have dreams, but they also figure out who they are. You know, you kind of learn your capabilities, what you like and what you don't like. You may get this idea that you want to do something with your life and then realize, hey, I don't like this after all. Where in a setting like this, sometimes you don't get to change your mind. Like Jon, I mean, he took the black, like that line from Jaime is not in the books, but it's pretty on point when he says, oh, and if you don't like it, it's only for life.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, ouch, damn, that's cold. But he's right. I mean, they wanted this to sink that point in, and it's pretty true. So, and that's a thing, like you brought up joining the army. When you join the army, it's not, well, at least not in the U.S., it's not forever. It was a 2-year, 4-year hitch?
4 years for me. Yeah.
Okay. But Jon, he's in the Night's Watch for life. He didn't get to realize he had made a mistake as a kid and undo that. So, like you said, also, there's a lot of pretending of being something they're not or being someone they're not, right? If, for example, Sansa, like you said, she has to be there. She's sort of like in the old gilded cage scenario where you're a prisoner, you're treated well. She's not treated well, but she's not treated like someone who's actually a captive inside a jail cell. She's treated like a little bird, so to speak. And she has to play along, pretending that she likes Joffrey or that she likes Cersei or that her family's traitors. And of course, later you'll get to that point in the books, and of course, it's maybe pretty similar in the show, that she becomes Elaine, but she still worries constantly about being recognized, which is a big contrast to Arya, who constantly changes her identity even before becoming a faceless person. Like imagine Sansa trying to pretend to be a boy. That just wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
Like just for physical characteristics, she couldn't pull that off. Whereas Arya
easily
cut her hair, and
yeah,
there you go. It works out. Even when she cut her hair, still a few people thought she was a girl, but she was able to pass. You know? So let's start with that. Since they were together a lot and shown as a contrast, the story starts off with them as kind of opposites. You know, you've got the girl who's very courtly and likes to dress up and wants to be a princess versus the tomboy who wants to learn to fight and all that stuff. So let's start there. Sansa is one of your favorite characters in the show. Is it kind of similar in the books?
It is, but it's hard to remove, my perspective of having seen the show.
Yeah.
For example, the moment in the show that really made me, okay, that's it, she's my favorite now, was when she kind of needled Joffrey a little bit. She's like, will we be riding in the Vanguard? Of course you'll be riding in the Vanguard. That moment was so perfect. And that scene happened in the book, but it didn't go down quite the same way, but in my mind it did. Does that make sense? She was still needling him the same way in the book as she had in the show. So I would still say she's my favorite, but I know I might be. I don't know if I would have still picked her as my favorite if I had just read the books and not seen the show.
Okay.
I think I probably would have eventually, at least, but it's certainly reading the books haven't made me like her less.
Okay, right on. Yeah. What are a couple things that you detect are a little different from her? I mean, obviously there's some straightforward things like she's younger in the books, which all the Stark kids are about 2 years younger. Some of the other characters are different in their ages, but for example, the Lannister twins are aged up a lot more than that. But just that's a different topic. What are some of the things that you think kind of stand out there as differences? Or is that not something you've really noticed a lot of?
It's not. I haven't noticed a lot of, but the one thing I think I might notice is just more because you get to hear what's going on in her mind. But she seems. I don't want to say. I hesitate to use the word frantic, but in her mind she seems more frantic. There seems to be a little bit more urgency to get out. You know what I mean? In his show, she seems a little bit more composed. But I think it's because you can't hear the thoughts in her mind. She's standing there silently, but in her mind, she's like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. In a book, you read, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just the idea of being able to see inside her head gives, that a whole different level of insight. And Sophie Turner's a fantastic actress, but of course, even though you can see the discomfort and the way she's manipulating her face to pull off these difficult, complicated emotions that would be playing off in her head, there's nothing like getting the text to show you exactly what those emotions are supposed to be. And on the other side, we have Arya. Have you noticed any substantial differences there, or is it also kind of similar?
And I would say that she does, in the books, come off a little bit more like a leader.
Okay.
There's more often that she's trying to organize Hopeye or Gendry or whoever. She's like plotting these plans to get out of Harrenhal. It seems like in the books or in the show, again, these are nuanced differences, not like it is this way here and that way in the other. It's just a little more on one side or the other, but in the show, it seems like she has a little less control over what's going on around her. She's just kind of getting hustled into these different scenarios and luckily getting out of it, whereas in the book, she's kind of takes these bold moves to be in charge of getting out of there.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's very astute. Yeah, and also, I guess you could say that she's more of a moral leader in the books too. Like you see some of that in the show. Towards the end, they were trying to show like she's very adamant about certain things and doesn't compromise on certain issues, but she's also kind of brutish about it. Like not if I cut their heads off. Things like that. Like what? Like that was a little awkward. But this Arya, for example, very early on in the story, she's like, why do they kill Michael? Why is no one being punished for this? Like, this is unjust. She legitimately doesn't understand. Yeah. She's very disappointed because she took more of these things about life to heart. She didn't kind of like a lot of adults have learned to compromise, and the world is full of compromises. Arya is very uncompromising, and I think that's an interesting aspect to her character. And that lack of compromise is both helps push her towards where she's going. It makes her, the type of person that the Faceless Men would want to recruit, as well as making it difficult for her to exist in human society like a normal person, because it's everyone. We all have to compromise, but Arya has difficulty with compromises. She sees things more in black and white. Pun intended. House of Black and White, right? Yeah.
That is another
That's
thing.
That's not the first time that joke's been made.
It's like the second time?
Yeah, I think. Only the second.
Another thing about youth, when you're younger, you have this idea that, once I grow up, life sucks so bad, but once I grow up, I wish I could be a grown-up. You have this idea that things will be easier. No, it's never easier than when you're a kid. You get to have these naive ideas of uncompromising morals or whatever, but you find that usually when you grow up, you're taking on more responsibilities. You have faced more disappointments, maybe with your own decisions or the nature of the world around you. I'll tell you another difference in the book. Did Arya go into those wolves and kill the crap out of those Vargo Holt, is that his name?
Yeah. With the
was that
when
a
she
dream?
becomes Nymeria. No, that really happens. Yeah.
I was uncertain at first, and I got to the end. I was like, wait, I don't think that was a dream.
Yeah.
I think that was Pretty murderous little moment there. Yeah.
Arya has quite a few. Arya is interesting. It's her stubbornness. That's another thing about her. She's extremely stubborn, even with her what she believes. And yeah, she has a lot of dreams. Everyone's wolf dreams start in a Clash of Kings. No one has wolf dreams in the first book. It's not necessarily if you're not like specifically keying into that, you don't necessarily notice. Bran starts to have the prophetic dreams. Right away he has the coma dream. When he's unconscious after falling, and then at the end of the book, he and Rickon both have that dream of their father in the crypt. But the first wolf dreams start in Clash of Kings for all the characters who have them, and that's a lot of characters. You're not sure that Robb has them, but it's implied he does.
Maybe that's why you need to keep a Stark in Winterfell.
Maybe. There is the mystical side to this is kind of unanswerable. I haven't seen any great theories as to what happens when the Starks aren't in Winterfell.
Testing.
But it's an interesting idea, and you wonder where that topic came from. Let's back up a little bit. We were planning on talking about the history of Starks in Winterfell and how some things compare to the end of Clash of Kings.
Has there been another moment when there were no Starks in Winterfell?
There's bound to be a few that we're not aware of, but if ones that we are aware of, yes. And it's interesting if we start by going back just a little bit, we go back during Robert's Rebellion. It's not explicitly said in the books, but George R. Martin has revealed that Benjen was the Stark in Winterfell during Robert's Rebellion.
Okay.
And he took the Black almost immediately on Ned's return for the end of the war, partly because he had a son already. Robb had been born by then. So, and he was married to Catelyn, and it seemed like that would be enough. So, and of course, there's, just as an aside here, when they're deciding who's going to go south, right? When they're talking about it, Ned and Catelyn are sort of debating who's going to go south. It's like, yeah, Arya and Sansa will go south. Bran's one of the ones they argue over. Ned says yes, and Cat's like, no, he's too young. Of course, the plan is for Bran to go until he falls. But there's no thought to send Robb. That's not on the table for either of them. It's like no question Robb will stay. He's the heir. He's the Stark going to stay in Winterfell, and Rickon, of course, is going to be there too. He's too young to go. But before that, we don't have any certain examples, minus just a couple, and they're all involving the Boltons, and just like this current one is. Before the North was united under the Starks, so this is a totally different era. This is a long time ago. This is
you have to go
before the
that far
Andals.
back before we have a moment that we're sure of.
Oh, yeah, a certain one. Yeah, so it might be that this time at the end of Clash of Kings is the first time there hasn't been a Stark in Winterfell in many generations. We have no examples of Starks away from Winterfell, being completely gone from Winterfell any other time. It's possible that there was no Stark in Winterfell at the beginning of Robert's Rebellion. Well, no, I guess Benjen would have been there too. Benjen would have always been around. But anyway, so there's I couldn't come up with any examples other than these historical ones that are really old. So it's possible they've had a really, really long streak that was just now broken. I suppose it would be the year 299 roughly for the end of the Clash of Kings. So before the North was united under the Starks, the Boltons were kings. They were called Red Kings, which, why weren't they called Dread Kings? That's the Dread Fort. There's already a place called the Red Fort. So what were they called? The Fort Kings? Maybe they weren't. I don't think they were kings actually. So one of these Red Kings, King Royce II. Roose, yeah, kind of similar. He managed to take and burn Winterfell, but clearly it was restored. Then 300 years later, King Royce IV, named Royce Redarm for his love of bare-handed torture. They said he would reach into people's bodies and pull out their entrails with his bare arms or bare hands. So
without a glove?
I know, really, it's so unsanitary. That's just, yeah, really, that's just all sorts of disease comes from that. Just savages, I tell you. But of course, he clearly didn't eliminate the Starks for good either, because, well, then they're still around. So in these times, since Winterfell didn't hold the entire North, it's a different scenario when, say, Ramsay wipes out Winterfell and the Boltons can kind of take over because, well, the North is one united entity. So when the top spot is taken over, they kind of abscond with the whole thing. But back in these days, since the North wasn't fully united under the Starks, it's a different kind of scenario where, let's say, there's some Starks who escape this Royce II and/or Royce IV. They were able to flee from Winterfell either from some tunnels, maybe they hid in the crypt. You never know, and they would be able to go to some other kingdom to hide. They could maybe even go to the south, but they could also just go next door maybe and hide with the Umbers. Well, that wouldn't be next door, but they could hide somewhere at Barrington maybe, or maybe White Harbor. Well, there wouldn't have been a White Harbor back then, so they couldn't have hid there either. But there's places, I tell you. Maybe they could hide in the neck with the Cranach men, things like that.
How long would they have had to hide?
Good question. Clearly these Boltons weren't either not successful at finding the Starks, which is not too hard to understand. The North is vast, and you're talking about just a couple of people trying to hide, a lot of places to hide. But I would guess it's not super long, but we have no way of knowing.
Well, like Bran didn't go to some place; he's just hiding in the woods, basically. You
Yeah.
know? Like if they had to hide for a generation, they might need to be at some castle or whatever. But
it's true, and it could be that long. It could be that long. They might have had to wait out King Royce II / King Royce IV until he died, and maybe when his son took over, it's a different guy in charge. They care about different things. Maybe they're just not as. This guy doesn't like to reach inside people's bodies and pull out entrails. He just really likes chicken. And you're like, okay, this guy isn't so bad. We can handle this guy. He just really likes chicken. He's not a problem. I don't know why I picked chicken out of all the things there.
Could have been broccoli. It could have been
broccoli.
I think that sounds like a king that Sandor Clegane could get behind.
Ooh, maybe a distant relative.
Looks like Ashay has got her microphone working now. Yay! There was much rejoicing. Clap, 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 clap. So there's a little Winterfell history for you. Now, interestingly, just like now, because the Boltons, as bad as they are, there are certain things even they would not do. For example, even Ramsay didn't burn the Godswood or the Heart Tree in the Godswood, and clearly neither did King Royce nor the second nor the fourth burn the Godswood / the Heart Tree. It would not be as large as it is. Doesn't seem to have any evidence of having been burned in the past. And of course, that's a religious thing. You don't generally destroy the religious symbol of the people you're trying to rule. That's not. Hey, Stannis, take a lesson, because that's the first thing he does in Davos's first chapter. But hey, that's another story. And of course, he also does want to burn the Winterfell Heart Tree. He doesn't get to, but anyway, again, that's another story. So even the Boltons wouldn't do that. So that's kind of an interesting thing to wonder if the Heart Tree, any sort of magic is in play, and the Heart Tree. We've theorized that Heart Trees kind of remember genetics because of the looks of certain houses is kind of maintained over thousands of years, and maybe the Heart Tree is the reason for that. That's just a fun theory we have. But we don't really have an answer as to why there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. I think it's not necessarily a magical thing. It could be born out of some sort of magic, but I think it's just a
good policy.
Yeah, it's a government thing. Yeah. The North has been relatively successful as a kingdom with Starks in charge. And so to me, it's like, well, if there's a Stark sitting in Winterfell, then there can be peace. It's a good thing. The Starks are doing a good job. They're good stewards of the North. In fact, you'll probably get to it pretty soon. There's a chapter where Bran and his gang encounter a friendly Northerner, and this Northerner talks about how, you could, when a Stark is in Winterfell, a woman can walk, naked from the wall to Winterfell, and nothing would happen to her. But now, you got flayed men, hunting a certain boy, and they're like, he's like, I don't know who you are. He knows, but he's like, I don't know who you are. So and that's a really good example of how the Starks are trusted and loved for keeping that peace, and that people value that stability.
And it is, you put a limit on the amount of war or expansion or whatever there might be. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
if the Starks were or whatever leaders were constantly leaving their capital to go fight in some other land, right? You're more likely to have this constant state of war. But if someone's got to stay home, like, all right, we're not going to war this time. I'm going to stay here. If we're going to go to war, I got to convince my subjects to go to war for me, right? Then
Yeah.
that might be harder to do if I'm not going myself. So okay, let everyone just stay home and not go to war. It does seem like it would contribute to more stability.
So there's a couple of people asking about the crypts and why maybe the Boltons wouldn't have destroyed the crypts if they were trying to take out, the Starks or try to reduce their rule. It's possible that they didn't know where it was. That is a thing in A Dance with Dragons. Minor spoiler here. There was people come to ask. Well, I won't even say which character. That character who is in Winterfell. They're trying to find the crypts, and they ask this character. So it's not widely known where the crypts are. That could be an issue. On the other hand, if they were really determined, there's no way they wouldn't find it. If they were just like, we're not leaving until we find these crypts, they would find the crypts. It's only a matter of time before they'd find that entrance. So I guess they just didn't think it was that important. Maybe, just maybe, the ruining of one of the lower levels of the crypts is evidence of that. Possibly that, because we know one of the levels is collapsed. It's been said that was due to a cave-in, but maybe this cave-in was caused by someone else or triggered by someone else. If someone were to go in and smash all the beams, the things holding the supports, holding the ceiling up and all that, you could see that being collapsed. So maybe, just maybe, that one of those collapses was laid at the feet of the Boltons. But that is a complete guess. There's nothing particular to suggest that. So I guess they just didn't care that much. It's just, just a bunch of statues. Or maybe also they believe in the same thing. Maybe there's superstition there. You don't want to unleash the spirits of those Starks. There could be some superstition involved for sure.
Roose Bolton's superstition. Yeah, I guess the Boltons might be superstitious.
Yep, everyone seems to be in a world where you have overt magic like that, and it was only a few centuries before where they were sacrificing people to the trees. Yeah, I would probably believe in that.
Even if they weren't superstitious, they might be a little stitious.
They might be a little stitious. Yeah, you gotta be at least a little stitious. There's no such thing as being unstitious in Westeros.
That's just a made-up word.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So basically, Bran, since we're kind of on Bran right now, basically, you mentioned briefly that Arya is kind of like doing a D&D thing. Bran kind of is too. They have this kind of unspecified magical creature they're trying to find, the three-eyed crow. They don't exactly even know where he is, but they had this dream about him. Even Jojen and Mira. That's something that isn't made clear in the show, I don't think, unless I remember wrong, is that Jojen has the dream as well. And that's what has a dream of the three-eyed crow. And Howland Reed sends Mira and Jojen to Winterfell after finding out about this dream. So he's this guy who knows things that he's got to come on screen sometime. Come on, man. Come on, Howland Reed. We're howling for Howland. He's got answers, and we have questions. So he doesn't just know about the tourney at Winterfell. He doesn't just know about the Isle of Faces. He doesn't just know about Lyanna's parentage and all that stuff. He also has some insight into magic and dreaming, and yeah, who knows? So that's cool. But that's another topic also. It's so easy to get sidetracked here, isn't it? So Bran has to avoid everyone. He and Rickon too. Like, that's kind of like a D&D thing. They split their party because they're two different little adventures they're going on. Rickon we don't get to follow because there's no POV with him, so we just kind of hear about that later. But Bran, he has to avoid everybody. He has to go beyond the wall. I'm kind of doubting the Starks that fled Winterfell after Royce II and Royce IV went beyond the wall. But hey, that's a possibility too. That's a interesting place to hide, and that brings him into the same realm as Jon, because at the same time that Bran is trying to get beyond the wall, Jon has already gone beyond the wall and is having to pretend to be something he's not. He's not a wildling, but he has to pretend to be one. And that's really interesting because, like a lot, it's less true for some of these other characters. Sansa doesn't want to keep pretending what she's doing. Arya, maybe she likes being a faceless person, but she'd rather be home. We don't know what Rickon wants. Rob, he's being forced into a role a little early, but Jon is actually starts to like being a wildling, kind of, and it's kind of sticks with him afterwards. But let's stop on that for a minute, or talk about that for a minute. Jon, his journey into becoming a wildling and then leaving the wildlings and coming back is kind of difficult. That's kind of where you're at right now, right? No, you're not quite. He's not fully back yet.
Yeah, he's pretty much just now joined the wildlings.
Okay. Right on. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you're right. I got that mixed up. Yeah, he's just now joining the wildlings, so he's thinking about his feelings for Ygritte, which is a real conundrum for him because he's got this whole thing that Maester Aemon talks about, the whole duty and love conundrum, and well, that's the thing to struggle with, and he's maybe this is what Benjen was talking about, right? You know, you don't know what you're giving up.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't care. I don't want to have any bastards. Blah 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 blah. Well. Let's remember that Jon was also drunk in that scene, that first chapter of his. He's drinking lots of wine. So tell us what you let's talk about Jon. What do you think about Jon joining the wildlings and his comparisons, book to show, and all that?
It was more, I'm gonna say this, surreal. I guess I don't know how to say it. It was surrounded by more violence, I think. It seemed to kind of like haphazard in the show.
Yeah.
That Ygritte just runs off and he just runs off chasing her and suddenly he's surrounded.
Yeah.
Whereas and then after they were captured, kind of staged the fight, right?
Yeah.
Where here was
the stage fight is like right. Right,
they were like kind of captured and surrounded, and it happened right then and there.
They tried to go through that mountain pass, but the eagle had kind of outed them.
Yeah,
stupid eagle. Orel.
It was exciting. I will say there's lots of exciting moments in the books
that aren't in the show. Yeah. Some of them are just it would have been too difficult to make those scenes happen. You know.
Yeah. And also sometimes I kind of like, a lot of times when I'm watching a movie or a show, I'm rolling my eyes at some of the action. I did some in the books a little bit too. I'm like, I guess I'll just accept it. Brienne caught up with the boat or whatever. It was an exciting scene on the river, but yeah, it would have been hard to translate to the show. But
yeah, like Corrin in this fight, when Corrin and Jon fight in the book, the Ghost is like grabbing Corrin's calf and like. How are they going to do that? How would they show that?
Yeah.
That'd be really difficult to show that visually.
It is interesting that Jon is not just that he's joining the wildlings or that things aren't going the way he thought, but kind of like you said, I haven't got to that yet, but it seems like he enjoys being with them. It's so far the opposite. It's not just that he's not doing what he wanted or thought he was supposed to do. He's the opposite, like the farthest opposite, you know what I mean? And you could kind of say that for a lot of the other kids too. Like, hey, Sansa, how about instead of marrying the prince, you become a prisoner?
It's like,
no, that'll never happen.
Can we meet in the middle?
Yeah.
Is there some sort of compromise?
Hey, Jon, how about instead of joining the wall, you join the wild? Like, yeah, right. Like that would ever happen.
Isn't there a compromise in between these two extremes?
Yeah.
You went right from joining the Watch to joining the Wildlings.
It again makes me wonder if Martin like had that idea. How at what point he decided I'm going to go the total opposite of where they think they're going, not quite where they thought they were going, or it's not as nice as they thought. But
I guess you're right. It's kind of like basically all of Clash of Kings. He's beyond the wall as a brother, either part of the large group or then part of running.
Yeah,
and then in a Clash of Kings or in a Storm of Swords, he's joined the Wildlings and is trying to get back, but has to exist there for quite a while. Until he has his opportunity to run. But then he doesn't want to run, but he does want to run. And yeah.
It's a neat idea, too, that, I don't know, a challenge of leadership or organizations. I don't know how to say it exactly. But the idea that, on one hand, you want people maybe to earn their position. Does that make sense? Like, Jon shows up at the wall, and he knows how to fight with a sword, and maybe he's kind of spoiled and privileged, just kind of expects they're going to make him a ranger and he's going to be a lieutenant or whatever, you know. But everyone's like, we don't care. You haven't earned your place yet, you know. And on one hand, it kind of makes sense that you have to prove yourself. But on the other hand, on some level, like, look, we need someone who can freaking fight, you know. Like, maybe they don't want to give him certain privilege, but they can't ignore that he is a good fighter. And
Right.
he learns this lesson, like, look, you're a good fighter. You're a better fighter than these other guys because you were trained. You're a rich kid that got trained and they didn't. It doesn't make you a better person. But he is still a better fighter. Look, man, if you need someone to go fight, pick the guy that can fight. And the wildlings seemed a little bit more like, oh, he can fight. All right, good enough. Like, we don't care if he's rich or poor, how or why he was trained. If he can fight, he can fight, you know.
And that's something that's kind of an attitude John respects more than this, like, you be here and be in this kind of, he respects duty, but he sees the he gets to see both extremes. And
Yeah.
this is that compromise I was kind of talking about. Now I'm being more serious. Before I was joking. So as John gets back, that's going to be a struggle for him. He's got to keep in mind these things he learns. It's the same kind of thing that Bran is faced with, the same kind of thing Sansa is faced with in the show, which is that they have these disparate populations that want different things from their ruler. And in some cases, these things put them in conflict, these two disparate populations. Like the North and the Wildlings have hated each other for a long, long, long time. And, well, it's only through the leverage brought by the undead army that kind of forces them to allow to fight together rather than, gives them some reason to be friendly. Other than that, though, it would be really difficult for something to bring them together, given thousands of years of enmity like that. Kind of like the Boltons. But interesting question here from, who is this person? We have from Taff. Thanks for the question, Taff. It says, why are there no ancient Stark artifacts like bronze armor or a bronze sword? Even the Royces have some cooler artifacts. Well, interestingly, it is mentioned at the beginning of the story that there was a different sword named Ice that before the Valyrian steel version of Ice, which is only about 400-ish years old. And, well, I'm not saying that the older version of Ice was made of bronze, but if you go back far enough, it would have had to be. They certainly wouldn't have been able to make it out of steel. But as to why, I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe they just don't care about keeping artifacts. Maybe one of these other times that the Winterfell was burned, they lost a lot of such items. They could have maybe there's the old bronze artifacts that the Starks would have had are sitting in the Dreadfort somewhere. They're like, we looted your stuff 1,000 years ago. We never gave that back. Y'all forgot about it. But, a lot of these ancient houses don't seem to have artifacts. George doesn't go quite as far with that as maybe other fantasy series might. Certainly there's some. There's certainly some examples of these artifacts and heirlooms and things like that. But he's more concerned, I guess, with having these super ancient houses than them having ancient stuff. I guess there's...
I can also imagine that they may be, cannibalized for winter. They may something that seemed valuable, like in time of peace, some piece of armor, some gold or whatever, like, all right, winter's here. All right, melt it down, trade it for food. You know what I mean?
It's possible. Yeah, they may have had some particularly bad long winter. They may have had to sell
multiple bad long winters, right? Like,
yeah, given all the winters that have been in all the thousands of years of the North, there could have been some particularly awful ones where even Winterfell ran out of cash. I could believe that. That's a good guess. I like that a lot. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, for example, even John in Dance with Dragons, another very minor spoiler, he's looking for ways to feed the Watch in the coming winter. He's thinking ahead, like, well, what are we going to do? He's trying to think of what Winterfell does, and one thing he does is borrows money, right? So if you could see that, in a certain era, maybe there was no Iron Bank to borrow from, or maybe there was no way to. Maybe the Iron Bank was like, no, we're not loaning you money. Yeah. Selling off, like that's what Daenerys and Viserys had to do when they were on the run. They had to sell their mother's crown, which to them was a great shame. But it was that or be homeless. It's kind of a funny item to be able to. It's like, well, should we sell this extremely valuable bejeweled crown or live on the street?
I'll also say, like earlier, thinking about how the Starks are staying in Winterfell rather than running off on, expansion, imperialistic missions or whatever, they might have pillaged and looted less stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Might have less need or might treasure less weapons and armor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They might be thinking more about how do we maintain our home rather than how do we equip ourselves to go out for war. And it does seem like more like the Starks to take care of their people, as opposed to like the Greyjoys, the Iron Islanders, are more likely to have gone off and looted stuff from other people and to hoard it for themselves and not share it with their people, you know.
That makes sense, yeah. Question from Sir William Moss, the Sword of the Mid-Afternoon, about 3:30. He says, right, so you would think the early kings in the crypts would have bronze rather than iron swords. Now that I'm not so sure about. Iron and let's clarify the difference between some of these items. Iron swords isn't the same as a steel sword. The iron swords don't have to be something they used in battle. It could be decorative. If they believe, and of course the reasoning here would be that we're told at the beginning of the story that the others don't like iron. That knowledge isn't repeated, so maybe it's just a piece of old wisdom that's less true than George originally intended. But that would the point being there's some kind of superstition or a real stition about the way iron works with some of these spirits and or the others. So it may not be that they wielded iron swords back in the day. They may have preferred bronze, but they had the ability to make iron swords at the same time they made bronze swords. They just iron weapons aren't super effective. It's the higher temperature that allows them to mix carbon into with iron that allows them to make steel. So that's a technology thing. But ironworking existed in the time before the Andals. They just didn't have you couldn't do a lot with it. You could make fences and shield bosses and things like that, but you couldn't make it super sharp like steel. Okay, let's see here. Let's move on a little bit. So let's talk a little bit more about Arya. Like you said, a bunch of young people, map, sword, horse, special coin. Even she's got her
food.
Little packages of food, and you wonder you can imagine her when she's drops the coin on the ground to fool that guard into reaching it, like she has to make a roll whether he's fooled or not. If you roll like a 1 through 5 here, he's not fooled, and then you can't reach his neck to stab him. So let's talk about Arya for a minute. What are some of your you said that there's, what did you say a minute ago? There's like she has more agency here in this story, because you can see her taking steps to escape and see her taking steps to make the next things happen. And
making the decisions in her mind too, like
like her thought processes and all. That's a really big part of what makes the books as a medium it's a huge advantage they have over the show is the thought processes. That's something I just really love about the books, that you can never really get that in any TV show for the most part. And of course, TV shows have their own advantages. You can never get amazing facial acting or music and there's
fair, sometimes you can't get thought processes because you can get narration.
Okay, good point. You're right. It's not never. It's just harder to do.
More difficult. Yeah.
It's a little harder to pull off. Arya, she's got who she has, which is Hot Pie. She has Gendry. Poor Lami is killed a while back. And that's all there's some fairly similar arcs there in terms of who they have to encounter, who they have to deal with. One major difference is Roose Bolton instead of Tywin. What did you think of that? I mean, the Boltons are a big part of this episode because they're the ones who drive the Starks out of Winterfell each time. So I've added a lot of notes about the Boltons and some about Theon as well. So how did that strike you as a difference? The difference meaning Theon, not Theon, but Tywin. Tywin's scenes with Arya were really good. Those were really well received.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I think Arya and Roose is pretty interesting too. But it's different because Tywin and Roose, they're both pretty creepy bad dudes, very cruel, but they're pretty different still in some pretty significant ways.
For better or worse, the interactions. From an entertainment perspective, I think that it was better on the show to have Arya interacting with Tywin.
Okay.
I think that was more entertaining. But one thing it does, especially at that point, I don't think that we knew as much about Tywin. We didn't know the story about the Reigns of Castamere yet.
That's true.
Right?
That's a good point.
And so...
he's formidable. He's like a bad dude, like really... like.
But it's a little easier to look at him as like have respect for him. And really, he's this awful villain. It deserves to die. He's just terrible, So, and that's another thing the show does a lot of times is people who, in certain ways, are awful, you gain your admiration. The It's another difference too. Like I have way less. Theon does some awful stuff in the show, but I still found myself justifying him and his actions in the show. But in the books, I'm like, screw Theon. No, he's a rapist. You know what I mean? Like, no, I don't care. You know. But another thing that it does in the books is I think it's one reason I feel like Arya has more agency because she doesn't have that. It's not that Roose isn't like a powerful figure that she's interacting with, but he is less, or I perceive him as being less formidable than Tywin. And of course, I'm kind of clouded by the show, but also there's less of that interaction period.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? A higher percentage of Arya in the show was interaction with Tywin, which makes her seem even more subservient than in the books. A lot more of it is her on her own, instigating this little rebellion, if you will, and so on. You know, so I think it subbing out Tywin with Roose and a lower ratio of interaction of her with Roose than with Tywin is part of what's giving her more perceiving me perceiving her as having more agency. So.
Right on. And now, of course, there's other, differences. Like we get Arya as more of a vehicle for receiving news in the book because the show can be more overt with these things. For example, at the end of Arya's Clash of Kings arc is right when the Freys find out that Robb has married Jane Westerling, even though that's not made explicit to the reader yet. And Roose sort of has this symbolic betrayal of the Starks by going hunting for wolves. And he has these wolf pups made into gloves. And it's kind of like happening right around the same time that Theon has fake killed Bran and Rickon. And it's like, oh, well, I guess Roose has realized that the Starks have made a big political blunder, and he's starting to make a different turnaround, and everything just falls into his lap. He's already got the Walders. He's got the big and little Walder, the two, not the twins, but the cousins from the twins. That once Ramsay takes Winterfell, he captures them. So he has this thing to negotiate with Walder Frey over. He's like, yeah, let's do this marriage deal. But by the way, I have your your two grandsons.
Before you answer,
I have them very safe. Nothing could possibly go wrong with them, and you'll see him even bring that up during the Red Wedding before things go bad. He's like, and blah blah blah. The two, and like Catelyn notices, looks at Walder Frey, and he's like, his mouth gets a little. He's like, veiled threat, eh? So yeah, it's pretty interesting to see how far back the Bolton scheming goes here. I guess you could say, I think it starts right around there. Like Roose is always aware, looking for an opportunity like this, but he didn't start to turn until this political blunder by Robb. So that's pretty neat. So let's maybe we can. Do you have anything more to say about Arya? About her traipsing around the Riverlands, or should we can move on to Robb, since we're kind of...
We can move on.
Cool. All right, so Robb. Actually, let's do our mid-roll break, and then we'll come back to talk about Robb. Want to thank everybody again for coming. If you have been, hopefully, go ahead and last chance to send us an email to Westeros History Giveaway for a free ticket to Ball at the Wall in Nashville on October 26th. That's a Saturday. And it's at Opryland, Gaylord Opryland. So by the time I finish reading the rest of our mid-roll announcements and things, I will turn over to Ashay here, and she will do a little bit of a drawing here, and we'll see who the lucky winner is. All right. Let me offer some thanks to a few of our other patrons who help make the show possible. We love y'all for the continuous support. It is vital. It is very generous, and it is why we are here. Thank you to Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian steel arak with a dragonbone hilt, Kohokohi, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a dragonbone bow, and Kokavo the Tamer, wielder of the wildfire whip Gehenna. Those are the History of Westeros Blood Riders. Also, thanks to the Queens of Love and Beauty. From the depths of Flea Bottom, Lord Ken of House Hammer has declared for Queen Carrie, Fire of the North, who recovered Dark Sister from beyond the wall. And a laurel of glory in the name of love to Bud of House Beresford, Knight of Tolkien and Arbiter of Scotch from Sandy the Dragon, Blood of Queen Daenerys, and Lady of Jameson. They've got their own little alcohol war in their house there. I can't pick a side. They're both good drinks. And also thank you to our History of Westeros sellsword captains. Actually, no. Yeah, sellsword captains. I think that's right. Peter Blaze of the Emerald Isle, captain of the Werewood Wanderers.
How could you not do Northern Champions?
Should I do? Oh, yeah. You know what? You're right. I should do Northern Champions. Well,
sorry, Peter Blaze.
I think I actually did them last time anyway. I mean, I'm not sure. Anyway, you're right. I should do Northern Champions. Ashea is correct. Good correction from Ashea there. Northern Champions. Jay Wilson, Winter's King, first off. Then Sir Stephen, the Hammer of the North. Winter's King, Lord of the First Men. Then Lady Ardros, Mother of Wolves, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Claymore Manticore. Sir Brian the Returned is Knight of the Last House, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade Red Song. Sir Kobe of House Stonesmith, words are when words are words are not wind. Words are muffled and garbled, and I can't say them properly. Sir Kobe of House Stonesmith, words are wind, deeds are stone. Lady Cat Jones of the Big Pond, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade Ginger's Honor. Jake Snow, aka Jacob Ice Eyes, is the bastard of the Last River. Lord Darren of House Rambler, the last hunt is ceaseless, is their motto. Lady Bobby of House Mitchell, Bulweir the Purple of Heavenly Mythhead House Taurus, and Gandalf the White, that's W-I-G-H-T, Lord of House Seamorn. Seamorn, yeah. Like dead things in the water. Oh yeah, watch out. I had something else to say, but I don't remember what I was going to say. I had something else really funny to say, but I guess I won't say it. Maybe it wasn't that funny after all. So
we should do my council.
Well, they're at the end. We'll do that. That's the end. Yeah, we'll get them. They'll get in there for sure.
Hey, Sean, what are you drinking though?
Oh yeah, I never asked what Sean was drinking.
This is just Coca-Cola.
What?
Here in Atlanta.
That's just. I'm so disappointed in you for only drinking Coca-Cola. Nothing mixed with it? You didn't...
No.
I mean, ice is the only thing you put in there?
Ice.
That doesn't really count. That's not a mixer. Ice isn't a mixer. Oh, boy. Sean, you're letting people down here with this plain beverage. Look...
I'll make up for it next time.
Cool. Okay. Well, Ashea, do we have a winner?
If we get
I think
1,000
we
live
should...
viewers, I'll drink Coke
I think we
and
should
milk
keep it
mixed
until the
together.
end.
Okay. Shea says keep going a little longer. So, y'all, you still have time. It's been extended a bit. You can still email WesterosHistoryGiveaway@gmail.com to get your free ticket to Ball at the Wall.
Now, people shouldn't submit to that unless they're actually going to go to Ball at the Wall, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, let's.
Unless you have a friend that could go, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
definitely. Yeah, if you can transfer the ticket. Certainly.
What's
That's
the
fine.
date for that again, by the way?
October 26th. That's a Saturday. It's Halloween weekend, basically. Halloween falls on, I think, Thursday this year, but so this is the closest Saturday to it. And yeah, we're looking forward to that.
We're gonna see Sean like open his phone real quick and type out an email, see if he can win it.
What was the date for the...
Yeah, Sean wants a free ticket.
I think they did actually offer me one, but I'm just not able to go. But
Yeah,
I
you're
really
so
wish I
humble
could.
too.
I really am pumped that the event is happening. I think it's such an awesome thing they put together.
Yeah, good job by Gina and team there for making this happen.
I hope it happens every year.
Yeah, that would be very nice.
You won't go ever though, because you're a workaholic.
So, also, shout out to y'all in the chat. I appreciate y'all coming I see a lot of good comments here. I wish I get a little bit of FOMO, not being able to see what everybody's saying at all times while I'm here talking. But I know Mache is grabbing some of the best questions and other
Sounds
things
like you're
that.
jealous of Bran not being able to see what's going on at all times.
Whoa, that's a deep psychology we're getting into here. Hard hitting and cutting. Speaking of hard hitting and cutting, let's talk about Robb. So yeah, like I said, Robb had just wed Jane off screen at the end of Clash of Kings. It's not really seen yet. Catelyn's going to find that out pretty soon. And that's when Roose is going to marry Fat Walda. And he's got that trump card with the hostages we just talked about. But we'll start off with some of your thoughts on book Robb versus show Robb. Obviously, physically, they're very different. You know, that's one thing that kind of stands out. Perhaps out of all the Starks, that's the biggest difference. Bran also is somewhat different from book to show, but mostly it's just about his coloring. Book Robb is not only has different coloring because he's supposed to be blue-eyed, red-haired, but he's supposed to be big. He's supposed to be stocky, not necessarily really tall, but kind of a thicker, burly kind of kid. Which I'm not complaining. I don't think it's a big deal, but one of the things we like to do when we talk book show comparisons is try to keep those versions straight, because it's really easy to just imagine the show version of a character when you're reading the book or thinking about them. So we like
which I definitely do.
Oh yeah, and some of them it's great. You don't have to worry about it because like you picture Maisie Williams or Arya, and you're right there.
Yeah, a lot of them are really similar anyway.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
And some credit maybe to the show for creating them and for nailing the character in certain ways that you maybe accepted, even though other ways are different.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like a lot of these actors really did kind of. Like, I don't know that I don't think about what Book Theon looks like a whole lot. He doesn't have a super distinct look, so Alfie Allen is like, yeah, that's fine. Tyrion's one that I had
I just want to say real quick, Theon, for example, it depends on how much you look at fan art. Or not even fan art.
Yeah.
Like, there's the board game art, card game art. There's just art in general, the art books. And if you've looked at it extensively, it influences things immensely.
Would you say that you don't picture Alfie Allen, or do you?
No.
You don't?
No, I don't picture
Oh,
Alfie
certainly I
Allen.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably there's probably
I look at more art than you guys do, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There's probably a real split for some people for whether they saw the books or read the books before the show, whether they developed a distinct version of the character in mind. Obviously, I read the books well before the show. But even because of that, some of the characters have gotten into my head. But others haven't. Like, Charles Dance is a great Tywin. But I do not picture Charles Dance when I read the books. And I do not picture Peter Dinklage either. Even though they're very, like, seminal actors for their characters. They really did a great job. But Tyrion, a different version of Tyrion was just burned in my head after 10 years of picturing Tyrion. It's just, it didn't, even Peter Dinklage couldn't overcome that.
Often when I'm picturing characters, they're reduced to, like, one or two defining images for them. So like for Tywin, I just picture these big mutton chop whiskers, the bald head, but like everything else, like maybe a glint of green, but I'm not seeing his whole face.
Are you picturing Charles Dance with giant mutton chops?
No,
okay.
I'm not. But I'm like picture a silhouette where you mainly see that, and the same with Oberyn Martell, for example, where I'm seeing his widow's peak and black hair, and lean features. It's I don't know. That's how I picture it. It's not like very exact.
The eyes are the real thing for me because that's where there's a real distinctness. Like the Lannisters are all supposed to have green eyes, while Tyrion has one green and one black.
I think it's green with like flecks of gold a little bit. Yeah,
which I think they should have done the purple eyes for the Targaryens, but I don't mind that they didn't give green eyes to the Lannisters and all blue eyes to all the Tullys. That would have been a bit much, but it is kind of neat that they have that. I do like it in the books that we have that distinction. So Robb, like I try to picture Robb like the Storm of Swords cover, like the large trade paperback version where you can actually see him wearing his crown. He has long red hair and he's big, and looks a little older probably in that shot, but he's supposed to be. That's kind of the way I think he's supposed to be depicted. He's supposed to look older than he is because he's having to be older than he is. He's having to take on a role of a king, which isn't something that a 14, 15-year-old is really supposed to do, even though he's pretty good at some aspects of it. But let's get your takes on Robb. Difference, Book and Robb difference, and some of these other things. Like, of course, it's different. You're going to be prepared to see a fairly significant difference in how the romance goes, different character and all that. But
Robb gets a lot less screen time in the books.
Yeah, you hear
he doesn't
hear about
have
from Catelyn.
POV, and so I don't have as many opinions on him in the first place. I do remember reading descriptions of him, thinking, oh, okay, that's different than my image of the books or the show, and I also think that I do prefer. I buy a lot of the characters in a show more being a couple years older than they are in the books. And I seem to remember reading one time that Martin said that he regretted making some of the characters as young as he did.
Partly because he ended up scrapping. He had originally planned to have a 5-year gap between. Well, at some point, there were different points at which he had planned it, but the last time he had planned it was after Storm of Swords. But then he got rid of that idea entirely. and certain parts of the narrative suffered a little bit because he had planned for those years to pass. But I mean, he did a great job of overcoming that change of plans. But there are a few. Yeah, you're right. The Stark ages are one of those sort of, oops, I wish they were a little older.
Yeah.
So I wonder if he dragged things out a little more, not drag them out, but extended certain things to just so more time would pass.
So a character could be at least 16 instead of 14.
Probably the biggest problem was the dragons aging, because they go from hatching to like, well, I guess they got to grow pretty fast, man, because there's no 5 years for them to grow. And at one point, George had said, well, if a 12-year-old has to take over the world, so be it. That was a quote. And Bran starts off at 7.
Yep. So
let's see. Do some quick math. 7 plus 5 is 52. No, wait. What's 7 plus? Yeah, so 12 is, so you wonder if that's who he was referring to in retrospect. It fits pretty well. He didn't take over the world, but he sort of euphemistically, in a sense, he took over, sort of.
To be fair, I mean, looking at Dany and her manifesto, so to speak, you could also argue that, he just was being vague. He just giving like the idea of a teenager, doing it.
That's true.
Which is not, I mean, we've obviously talked about different characters that he could be referring to there in general. But I will say it fits very much with what Dany was doing.
It also is, maybe we might think a little more strongly of Bran at this point than we would have a year ago.
Yeah, it's so much more for us to think about Bran-wise. Like, oh, we missed a lot. Dang.
Yeah, anyway, I will say in general, have kind of negative thoughts towards Robb. And again, obviously, it's way more influenced by the show than the books. I'm just now getting to the 3rd book, whereas I've seen every episode of the show at least 3 times, so my thoughts on Robb are probably still going to adjust more from the books. And in the show, I started off liking him. I think they did a good job of like having him assert himself and be right in certain moments, especially against other people who were older than him, even if maybe they should have been wiser. They didn't catch on to the idea that he's planting information with the Lannister cousin, not giving up information, and so on. So it's made it a little extra disappointing when I want to be proud of him, when he can't stick to this promise that he made, and especially when all these other people are, and it's sort of like the root, his honor is sort of the source of his authority.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? At least it should be. So many other characters' authority is coming from fear, right?
Yes.
But here's Robb, who's getting it from, I don't know how to say this, but like correctness, from boldness, from all these other more positive things, rather than
his enemies might be afraid of him, but his constituents are proud of him. They love him. They're not afraid of him.
Right. And not just because he's a Stark. Like, they start off, okay, fine, I guess he's Ned's son, so we respect him. But when he starts to do questionable things, they actually challenge him. But then he proves himself. I'm like, all right, awesome. And then he ruins himself. Like, oh.
Yeah, I'm thinking of right at the beginning of Clash or Storm, his first chapter, where you don't know the first time through. Well, you do if you've seen the show. But either way, you don't know it's a mistake. And in the book makes this less clear, because you see Theon writing to warn Robb about what's going to happen and then changing his mind and burning the letter, which is not something that happens in the books. It's just Theon shows up to Pike and is like, hey, I came up with this idea. It's my idea. He didn't give me this. It's my idea. Mm-hmm. And Balin's like, no. We're attacking them. And Theon's like, oh, all right then. And you can see, like, Catelyn says, don't send Theon back to the Iron Islands. Then send someone else. Keep him as a hostage. And Robb's like, no. And he just kind of walks off. And he's like, no, I'm doing what I want. And it's like, oh. And it's, the first time through, it's not clear what a huge mistake that is. But it's a huge mistake. Yeah. And it's like, damn.
I want to point out, by the way, it's more of a mistake being results oriented. He might have been taking a gamble.
I don't think it was. No, I think it was a mistake. I mean, I'll hear you out, but I mean, Ned warned of not doing this, and
I'm not necessarily saying it was correct or it was not a mistake, but it might not have been a pure, obvious, huge mistake. Mm-hmm. Like, if there's X% that he gets the Iron Islanders on our side, it might be like Rob
Well,
might not have gone through that calculation.
He didn't
You know what
consider
I
that
mean?
they would attack him.
Right,
Like, that's
right.
the one of the possibilities. Yeah.
Rob still might have been making his mistake, but I'm just pointing out that, like, I don't know, if you could roll a 6-sided die and on 1 you get $1,000 and on 2 through 6 you lose $100. You're more likely to lose, but if you win, you get a lot.
Yeah.
So Rob might not have.
He didn't see
Those numbers might
Yeah.
not be accurate, and Rob might not have thought that through. But I'm just saying there was some chance that he gets the Iron Islanders on his side. He might not have been. He didn't know Balon. Now maybe he should have listened to Caitlin because she did know Balon, and he didn't.
better.
So.
She was like, "Well, better to keep him as a hostage if you want him on your side. Like this will work
Send
better."
someone else with the message
Yeah.
and keep Theon and
But I don't even think Catelyn even necessarily foresaw this possibility. She knew that it was a bad idea to let him go, but she didn't say, well, they could just attack us. She didn't say anything.
Right,
like that.
she didn't give him a reason. Right, she said no, don't do it. They oftentimes.
Well, she said you
characters-
can't trust Balon Greyjoy. She didn't say why you can't trust him.
I think she said you can't trust the Greyjoys.
Same difference. He's the one
It's a
in
little
charge.
different because
Well, he's
Rob,
still the one in charge.
But if Rob trusts Theon,
Well, she's saying you can't let Theon go because you can't trust the Greyjoy. So she's
Right,
not including
yeah,
Theon in that.
but it is still like this kind of nuance of wording that we're having. They should have had. They should have had a better
Yeah.
conversation before they make this
Yeah.
huge decision. But I do want to point out other things that Rob did. If they hadn't worked out, we would look at as mistakes. He did take some chances that worked out.
Yes,
We don't look at this
that's
as
true.
mistakes being resorts or anything. They worked out, so we don't think. But they still might have. There might have been some times where if you roll a 1, he gets 100, and if he rolls 2 through 6, he loses 500. He just happened to roll a 1, so it looks like he's awesome. But he might have actually made some mistakes in some of the places that turned out to be mistakes or victories.
Right on. Laura Brondos, Lady of Infinity, Laura Boros, says, I wish the cat had explicitly told Rob word for word what Ned's final words to her were about Theon. And I don't remember Ned's final words exactly, but it was something along his lines, like, don't, keep Theon close. Like he was even more concerned about the Iron Islands when all this stuff started happening, because he does know Balon. He was like, oh, in all this chaos of uncertainty, that's when they'll make their move, because that's what they did last time. That is what, like, when after Balon's play was when he launched his rebellion, 10 years prior to the start of the books. He was like, oh, they're not gonna support this new king. He thought there was too much uncertainty, too much instability. He was wrong. But it's the same kind of scenario. It's the same kind of thing he was waiting for. And Ned's like, this is that same kind of thing that Balon's waiting for. So hold tight to Theon.
It's another example of what it first bothered me in a show, but I realized, no, it's just part of his character, of Jon, is that so many times he, I don't know, figures something out, makes a decision, like in his own mind. He's like, this is what we have to do. And then just goes and tells everyone. He doesn't make plans. He doesn't consider counter arguments. He doesn't, let someone, close advisors, know up front. He just makes this big announcement. And he just doesn't communicate it well. I think it's often a mistake of the leader characters, maybe in the world in general, but certainly in Game of Thrones, or this story, that they don't communicate the reasons behind their decisions.
Like the Stone Mill thing with Robin Edmure. That's like a classic example.
Exactly. Yes, there's time and time again a leader has this plan in his mind, makes this decision, doesn't explain to people why he's making the decision, then someone else goes against the plan in a way that seems correct, but then turns out to be wrong because they didn't really understand the whole plan. And I feel
it happens
like
at the Wall too.
Yeah.
John has that same issue with communication, not being explicit with his orders, not explaining all his thinking, especially when he's doing something a little bit radical. It's like, well, you really need to explain this. It's so outside of the ordinary realm.
And a lot of times it's thought of as a virtuous characteristic, stoicism. A lot of times the silent, strong type or whatever. I know when I was a kid, I thought I kind of looked up to that. And a lot of times, like the silent bad boy character is sexy to the women and so on, but usually those people screw things up. Usually if they communicated a little bit more, things would be better off. Everyone would be happier,
To be fair, we all do that.
Yes,
all three of us do that.
I don't.
But
no, I'm just kidding.
I also tend to think that if we saw Jon learn to communicate better, then it's an arc.
Right,
it's
I agree.
A progression.
Yes.
And whether we see that or continue to see that, and we see it for different characters, remains to be seen. But they're all really young.
Yeah,
really
true.
young.
Yeah, like Rob and doesn't get another chance. For example, he doesn't get to learn from his mistakes, really. But no, but I see what you're saying, Shea. I think, but I do think it's fair to also say that when you're in that position of extreme leadership, which we're not, you have more responsibility to explain your actions. I don't have an army of thousands looking up to me.
Yeah, but you run a household.
True.
You don't always explain your actions, but maybe if you did, other people would understand better.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. You're
it's
right.
not as important though. People
right. People are going to
gonna
die if I don't explain my actions.
Yeah, it's not
properly.
as important for you to do it. But regardless, it's easier to say we should do it.
Yeah. That's true. No, you're right. Like I think there probably isn't a single person here that's listening or on our side of the camera that hasn't made that mistake many times in life of not explaining something thoroughly enough, not explaining it just kind of maybe because we assume too much or we think that other people just kind of get it, and it's taking things for granted, I guess you could call it. Yeah.
And also, I want to point out that you can see why Rob and John might do this because Ned did it too.
Yeah, that's true. Ned was. Yeah, that's true. Ned never, for example, never explained the John thing to Catelyn. He promised, maybe it's because he's took his promise that seriously. That's still, he was weighing one thing against the other. His promise, the sanctity of that promise, and whether he had any wiggle room, or his marriage, and telling his wife everything. So he had to weigh those things. It's kind of like the to a lesser extent, a more dramatic version of this is the concept that Jaime and other knights and people like Aemon have brought up. The duality of oaths and the conflict that comes within. Sometimes, like Jaime tells Brienne that, hey, if I don't kill Aerys, I've broken my vow to the common people to defend the weak. Like conflicting vows. Everyone calls me the Kingslayer for what was probably my greatest act, and that comes up in other places. For example, with Ned, his duty to his, just like what we just said, it's the same example. Ned with his duty to his wife / his duty to John and his sister, meaning Lyanna, not John's sister.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting kind of theme all throughout A Song of Ice and Fire, is this duty versus love and mercy versus fear and all these things.
Torn loyalties.
Yeah. Like how you have
secrets versus openness.
Yeah, secrets whether it's better to have it in the open, whether it's better to tell people, or whether the secret is better kept under wraps or not. Yeah, these are constant common themes throughout A Song of Ice and Fire.
When I first started watching the show, when I was trying to tell everyone else what a great show it was, that was one of my selling points. Is like, what do you do if you're a knight and the king tells you to do one thing and the prince tells you to do a different thing?
Yeah.
Like, which one are you supposed to do? So
which vow matters more to you? And, how do you... And some of these characters seem to have no trouble picking one vow over the other. And some of us in the real world, if we're faced like, I don't think it would be that easy. But for some people it is. They just know. They just make the decision easy. But most of the characters we see inside their heads, they aren't the type to make these decisions easily. We have characters who are thoughtful and who kind of, there are some exceptions like Victarion, who would be like, yeah, fight, he doesn't care about oaths as much as other things like that.
Sean's like, who?
Yeah.
He knows who he is, but he has no real ability to relate to that because having not read his POV.
You'll get to Victarion. He's a good example of a brute.
Don't think you're gonna love his chapters.
He's interesting, but not because he's interesting. His chapters have that potential, though, but that's pretty far afield from what we're talking about here. Let's see. So we've talked a bit about Sansa. We've talked a bit about Arya and Bran. Let's talk about a little bit about Rickon. Bran and Rickon have some things in common, of course, with their arcs, but
Bran's the one we've talked the least about. We talked more.
Okay.
John,
yeah, I guess
Rob.
you're right.
Yeah.
We've kind of been off and on about Bran. It's interesting too. He's the last to leave Winterfell. So there were Starks in Winterfell with him and Rickon until they had to flee because, well, it was no longer safe. They didn't have food. The castle was destroyed. All that. And it's interesting, I suppose, that one of the clues that we all maybe didn't give enough weight to as to him being a king eventually was all this time he spends down there with them.
The kings,
With
yeah.
the kings, yeah. In the darkness, it's like this is where he's going eventually. Only, it's mentioned a few times that there's only a few exceptions to the statues in the crypts being non-king/lords. And,
of course, it's a little bit of a misdirect because you would think some people would have been like, oh, Bran's going to be king in the north. Obviously, like the other kings in the north, kings of winter. No, he's just going to be a king.
Just the king, yeah. That's
So
a good
he
point.
won't, I guess the question is what's going to happen to Bran's body when he dies? How long will he live? All of these things. In the show, it's vastly different because he's not part of the tree.
Yeah,
and
we wonder if he's going to leave the tree in the books. I think he probably will. But
And if
What
he
did
leaves
they-
the tree, then he dies he lives a normal life and dies. And does he go to the crypts?
I would think so.
What did they do with the bodies of the Targaryen kings?
Burn
burned.
them.
Burn?
Yeah, they do
Okay.
burning. Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of a weird sort of backwards tradition that the only house we know of that does these crypt burials is the Starks. And they're the ones you would think would be most likely to burn the bodies because in the north, and it's
Yeah.
most of the regions we just don't know what they do. We don't know whether they do ground burials or
Well, we know about the Riverlands.
yeah. Well, we know what the Tullys do. We
Yeah,
don't know if
you're
that's what all
right.
of them do.
Yeah,
The Tullys do these boat burials,
Yeah.
whereas the Blackwoods do some burials around their giant weirwood tree, and they're in the Riverlands, but not all of them. And so there's apparently a wide variety of burial traditions throughout Westeros, but it's a little funny that the one example we have of crypts is in the place where you don't really want to preserve these bodies. You really just don't give them that. Give them that ammunition.
Did they still honor Ares' body with the burning, or did they like dump him in the water, or
I don't know.
put his head on a
Actually,
spike?
That's
I'm
a
or-
good
not sure
question.
how they would have honored it. Certainly, like the Faith of the Seven, they have the whole, being prepared by the Silent Sisters. So it might be enough of an affront for him to be prepared and killed. I don't know, and displayed normally versus just burned as a Targaryen.
I would have left him just like on the floor in the throne
Just
room,
Decomposing.
Let him sit
decomposing,
there, yeah.
flies buzzing around, just to remind everyone.
Mm.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't actually. That's a detail we're not given. We're not told what Robert ordered done with the bodies. Maybe nothing at all.
Georgie, for listening, work that into the next book.
Okay, so yeah, we'll talk about Bran a little more then. So he's got a also sort of his identity questions are sort of interesting in their own way. All characters have these identity issues. For him, he has to at least pretend he's somebody else until he gets beyond the wall, and then he's just becoming something else.
Yeah, I mean, he already had, before leaving Winterfell, he already sort of became something
That's
else.
true.
And
By
had
losing
to
his,
face it.
yeah, you're right.
Like his idea of being a knight. That was something he was struggling with. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
That's true. Yeah, he wanted that. He wanted that badly, and it's interesting that the way that George wrote this foreshadowing, he's obsessed with, not obsessed, but one of the first thing Bran thinks about is how much he's fascinated by the Kingsguard. And that's a kind of a sneaky thing to attach to him, that one day he'll have his own Kingsguard. I was like, oh, yeah. He won't be one of them, but he will have his own. Right. Very nice. So he has with him Mira and Jojen and Summer, of course, and the wolf. Summer, the name of the wolf is, of course, an interesting way to think about his role in the story and how he takes over after Winter is defeated. That's kind of a neat way to think about it. And of course, he has Hodor. Now, Hodor is, of course, another part of his identity because he, over time, as you see in the show, and you'll get your version of this in the books, he does more and more being Hodor, and that's sort of like being somebody else. And it's also a strong ethical conundrum. It's not even really conundrum. It's wrong to do this. I think we could say it's wrong to take over someone's brain. Even it doesn't matter that Hodor is handicapped.
I gotta
It's still
say,
wrong.
being Hodor sounds like the feel-good hit of the summer.
Being Hodor. Yeah.
You seen those things where they re-edit previews? They like change the music to make the horror movie look like a comedy, or vice versa.
That being Hodor. Make it real happy sounding. Like, it needs to have like 80s sitcom music, like triumphing, happy triumph music.
I have to say, Laura Brando said, fun fact, Isaac Hempstead Wright is currently going back to university to study neuroscience.
Really?
Yeah, how perfect is that? Very, very perfect.
Wow. He's like, this has opened my eyes to all the possibilities of neuroscience. Wow. He must be a pretty smart kid studying neuroscience.
I mean, he wears glasses, so we know he's smart.
And he knows everything in the werewood net, so
yeah.
He could probably teach them a few things. So what are some of your thoughts on Bran at this point and some like book to show differences?
I detect fewer differences. I
okay.
feel like from the book to show, maybe. I'm not sure. I guess a part of that is because a lot of what's going on with Bran in the show is still kind of in his mind. There's a little bit less of him like. It's harder for him to go take physical actions. You know what I mean? It's
you see less of his internal struggle, his sorrow at being left out, not being able to do the things that the other kids are doing, things like that.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, like the Frey boys aren't even in the show at all.
Right. That's in particular because that's one of the things he gets jealous about is Rickon becomes friends with them and they're running around doing all this stuff and he's just like, dang it, I want to be out there, and it's making him bitter, understandably.
It was also just a strong reminder of the. I immediately, when all the kind of backlash, I guess, against the idea of Bran being king, my immediate thought was like, Bran's the only person we saw actually being pruned for this position. Like ostensibly, Robb was, but we didn't see that. You know what I mean? We saw Maester Luwin sitting there with him, going over all the house words. We saw him sitting up there having people come in, making decisions, getting actual advice from other people on how to actually fill this role, so
we also saw him having to, live on the lam and not live a life of privilege for a while.
Yeah, that's
which
true.
I think is important for a good king to experience what it's like to not just live in your castle happy as can be.
Yeah, he knows what it's like to starve. He knows what it's like to be chased, to be cold and hungry and all that.
I guess you get that from Arya maybe more than anyone. But you do get a good bit of that from Jon, and
Arya experiences these things. You're right, I think, because Arya has a lot of the same. Maybe she doesn't experience the extreme cold like Bran does, but whatever. That's a small detail. She experiences more of it alone, or at least with just one other person, like when she's with
definitely
Sandor.
Experiences hunger though.
Oh yeah, she does. You're right, no doubt.
Probably more than Bran, I think.
Maybe, quite possibly. Bran has some. There's some rough times up there. But yeah, they both.
I haven't got to a lot of it, I suppose. He's just now leaving.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten beyond the wall yet. That's when it gets worse for sure. But yeah, so that's a distinct similarity that they have there is that they, like someone like Sansa is well fed, but that doesn't mean she's not struggling in other ways. She's constantly she's wants to be running away. Like the people that would be running away from are constantly around her at all times.
She would dream of having hunger as her dilemma.
She would much rather be hungry than beaten.
Yeah. And put on display too. That's another factor too. Like I'm sure you could have stats and surveys can be twisted, but I bet this rings true. Most anyone listening. Top fear, surveys taken of people's top fears, of course, is death.
Yeah.
Second, number 2, public speaking.
Sometimes public speaking is more scary.
Yeah. It'll be different for different people, of course. But the point is, Sansa's constantly like put on display in front of people, and not in a position where she can. Like, it might be different if she could speak her mind, you know what I mean? Or if she actually had some authority, like Robb on display in front of people is different from Sansa on display in front of other people.
Yeah, that's true.
So, it's...
like something like, imagine Arya trying to, like, speak to the ladies who were afraid of the battle. Like, that's not... It's hard.
Yeah.
She's miscast in that role. Just like Sansa, imagine Sansa trying to, stand on one foot and catch cats. That doesn't... I mean, she might be good at it. I don't know. But it doesn't... It's not what you picture when you think of her.
To be fair, Arya wouldn't be good at it, but I don't think she'd be afraid of it.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think she would be afraid of it. That's a good point. She might be...
She might need to be afraid of it. She maybe should be afraid of it.
She would think it's stupid, just like Sansa would think it's stupid to stand on one leg and catch a cat. But
Or if
Sansa might also be good at standing on one leg and catch a cat. I'm not sure.
She might be afraid of it, but she knows how to deal with her fear. You know, she
Yeah.
might, you know what I mean? Like she would handle it one way or the other. That's a good take, yeah. And something they all have in common, because they all have to do these. They all have to pretend to either be something they're not, or be something that they weren't ready for. Like in Rob's case, like he's too young for this, even though he was bred and raised to be a lord and in charge. Well, a king is a lot, you know, something George Mormont points out to Jon. He's like, you know, you're gonna have to live with this. You know, Rob's gonna be served, you know, like his drinks in golden chalices while you're drinking, you know, crappy water out of a wooden cup. And he's like, you know, he's like, oh, he was always raised to be a lord. It's like, a king is not a lord. This is even different. You know, this is even bigger than that. You know, you can't sit here and tell me you're not troubled by that you have to do all this while he gets to be treated like a king. He's like, what are you going to do? And Jon's like, I'll keep my vows and be troubled. You know, it's like, I'll be troubled, but I'll keep my vows. And, well, I don't know. Did he? He didn't end up keeping his vows really on the issue of Robb. He did, but later, not so much. He was troubled and didn't keep his vows. And of course, the question of will his vows hold when he's dead? That's a whole nother ball of wax. We'll get to that some other time. So,
So anyway, Bran,
yeah, that was all about Bran. Yeah, it's very Bran-like, that conversation. So he has less of this pretending because he doesn't interact with people. He's like specifically trying to avoid everybody, and it's this wide open north, and they are mostly successful in that. They don't have to encounter a lot of people,
but still facing identity issues.
Yes, because he's becoming this magical being, and he's clearly been given this destiny that 7-year-olds aren't generally prepared for, let alone adults are prepared for this. And but on another hand, another way, it makes him more prepared for it, because there's certain things he's not aware. He doesn't know to be afraid of certain things. You know, like the naivety almost protects him from some of the worst fears. Like he's not even aware of like how bad things are beyond the wall. He doesn't know like how many wildling raiders there are, what they would do to him if they caught him. You know, it's just almost like a happy piece of ignorance. But of course, that just allows him to focus on the overwhelming, oh my god, I have magical powers, and the end of the world is coming. Quite a thing got to focus on. So what do you think about Bran? The difference with Bran and Jojen and Mira. Did you notice any differences with Jojen and Mira, or maybe it's not too far along for them to notice much difference?
Yeah, I think it's not too far along yet. It's at the point where both in the show they hadn't even come along yet, right? They didn't. I wish I could remember a little bit better, but he didn't encounter them till after he had left.
That's right. You're right. Winterfell is burned, and then he encounters them. You're right. Yeah.
So
that's like, it's like who are these mysterious people in the show?
Yeah, Osha and Mira have their little showdown, and which continues afterwards. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Which they also don't get along well in the books.
They don't get along. They're slightly competitive,
but it's not quite. They're not quite as at odds with each other.
Yeah, they never really argue. I don't think they ever actually have any fights. They split up pretty quickly. And of course, we don't see what happens with Rickon. We find out much later. That's another part of the reason we wanted to talk a little bit about Theon in here, is that the Theon connection includes how Rickon is later discovered. But that's not really. We'll talk about that some other time when you're farther along. But yeah, with Bran, he has to avoid all these things. He has to keep quiet and not be found by these Boltons who are out hunting him. Because if we go back to our history, think about this: it's not necessary that Royce II and Royce IV needed to kill all the Starks. Maybe they didn't need to kill all the Starks because the North wasn't united. Maybe just they think destroy Winterfell, and our kingdom will flourish, and eventually, over time, we'll take some of this land. Maybe they didn't see it as important to make sure there were no more Starks because, well, this was thousands of years ago, and the Starks weren't established.
Details get lost in history too. The big picture becomes more important. Like if you flash forward hundreds of years, it might be hardly known that the idea that Theon was looking for the Stark boys might just be lost in the history of things, you know.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, it could be, like a Bale the Bard story where the new Stark was, only had only some Stark blood, or was, someone was a distant cousin. There's always like that's a common refrain amongst these ancient houses, which is the only way for it to make sense that they could be. You could have these families last for thousands of years without them dying out, is to have, well, you bring someone in that's a cousin and they become the Stark in Winterfell, and it goes from there.
I suppose it is a little more likely for the Stark history to survive since Bran is king and knows the story, you know what I mean?
That's true.
Whereas you can imagine like certain histories, if not for that, it might be lost that Theon ever even took it. It might be just the Boltons took Winterfell.
Yeah.
Or the Boltons ever took it,
Theon.
just the Greyjoys took it and then the Starks got it back. Some of the details that happen over a few months time period might be lost hundreds of years later. Just the big picture matters. But because Bran is the king, it's more likely to get that actual history preserved better.
In this case, the Boltons restored Winterfell on their own because they needed it to hold the North.
Yeah.
In the past, that wouldn't have necessarily been true. They may still have wanted the castle. They may have restored it to keep it for themselves. And then maybe that's the scenario in which the Starks reclaimed it. But perhaps it's more likely that the Starks just got help from a friendly kingdom, or they were just able to take it back and hold the spot while they rebuilt it. There's a lot of possibilities, and maybe one day we'll get more answers. Unfortunately for the books, Winterfell's library was burned very early on, and whatever history might have been in there is gone. However, Castle Black has a substantial library with something that is almost a Chekhov's gun. Maybe not. It's probably not quite at that level of a plot device that's kind of hanging over everything, because it's a maybe. It's not like, say, The Horn, which is like, that's got to do something, or Nymeria in the Riverlands. That's got to do something. Chekhov's direwolves, as George called it. But so maybe some of that information is in Castle Black. And the point being, maybe there's a lot of things at Castle Black. Sam, very early in A Clash of Kings, is looking for maps. And he's just geeking out about it. He's telling Jon about all these things he found. He's like, oh, there's all these like descriptions of this and that. There's thousands of books down there. It would take years and years to go through it all. And Jon is just not interested. He's like, they had over 100 books at Winterfell. He's like, and I'm like, he's like waving, and I was like, yeah, but did you find the maps? He's like, yeah, but they found, he's like, blah, 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 giants and rangers trading with the children of the forest. And Jon's like, oh, it's so boring, man. Shut up. I'm like, no, Jon, you shut up. Let Sam talk. Tell us this cool history stuff. And so you wonder if these books will come into play more. They have, some of them get taken to the Citadel by when Aemon and Sam go south. So hopefully not too many. But yeah, I hope those books come into play more. We have that opportunity. George has left that open for us, maybe. But maybe he'll just have Castle Black just destroyed completely.
I remember as a kid, whenever when reading a book, someone would read the book, I was like, I want to read the book in the book. I was so enthralled by that idea.
All right. Okay, well, let's start to wrap things up here. We still have...
quick, can I point out as part of that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
This shirt that I have that I actually... You guys got to talk about your experiences at the cons, but one of mine was meeting Nickelodeon, Walmart, Costco.
Move your microphone a little bit.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just wanted to show the shirt off. You probably couldn't hear me there.
They could hear you, but
okay. Anyway, I thought this was such an awesome, like, you really have to know Game of Thrones to get this image, and even if you do, you might have to look at it for a second. So yeah,
Jamie Nikolai recognized it. Very cool. So Shea, do we have? Can we do the drawing now?
Give me 1 second.
Cool. I will continue to talk while you work on that. So thank you everybody for coming. Wanted to say that if you guys have the Sean, like I said, this idea for this stream was Sean's, this topic suggestion. If you all have topic suggestions for our recurring Saturday live streams, we don't really, honestly, don't need topic suggestions for most other things that we have going. We have a lot of topics, but for the Saturday live streams, that is something that we're open to suggestions for. So you can email us at westroshistory@gmail.com and let us know. You can also do that on Twitter. You can hit us at Westeros History or at Dancing Sean. Follow Sean on Twitter. I stole your thunder there. I said it for you. I know you're so disappointed. And also thanks to Michael Klarfeld for the maps you see behind us. Thank you to Joey Townsend and Jesse Coal for the music, and also to Kevin McLeod for the Valar Aretas music that we've been using on and off quite a bit. Thanks to Ashea for wearing so many hats and all these doing some live technical adjustments there to get your microphone working. That was cool seeing you work there behind the scenes.
Do you want your winner? You want your winner now?
Yeah, let's have our winner for a free ticket to Ball at the Wall.
First,
October 26th.
I need to make it known that if you submitted, we got very few submissions. So go ahead, and when we post on Patreon, you can submit there. We will have another ticket to give away, and we're going to do it there. And I just want to make sure people know, submit again.
That's
you're
right.
You're very, very likely to get it because...
That's right. Yeah, not a lot of people can go to this. I mean, it's Nashville.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a month away, so it's a small pool of people.
Yeah, we didn't expect to have a lot of entries, but we want to make sure that some lucky person gets to go for free because, we want to see you there. And
so out of our free tickets... Out of our few submissions, Laura Brondo.
Hey,
won.
Laura. All right.
I mean, we know our listeners in general. So either of the people who submitted, we would have known.
Right on. That's cool. All right, Laura, you're a winner. Very cool. Well, we'll contact you with that and how to get you that ticket and all those details.
I have another closing note, by the way. The Emmys for this past week.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones won. I can imagine some people are like, well, they don't even deserve it. But some people are like, yeah, go Game of Thrones. But also, while I have the chance, I want to give a shout out to Fleabag. Anyone who hasn't seen it, Phoebe Waller-Bridges and Fleabag also did really well at the Emmys and deserved it.
And also, hey, as we talk about It's Always Sunny a lot, It's Always Sunny was back this week. I'm wearing my It's Always Bloody and Winterfell shirt with the heads of the Starcs and the Sunny logo.
Meanwhile, Always Sunny has no Emmy nominations, no Emmy wins. But by season 20... It'll happen. It'll happen.
The gang is still desperately trying to win an award.
Yeah, that'll be great. A perfect sequel.
Okay, so time for some Patreon shout-outs and our outro music and such. Thank you all again for coming. We appreciate the live support, and if you are catching this afterwards, well, we appreciate that too. We hope you enjoyed this discussion, and we hope you tune in for Valar Reread every Sunday at 3 Eastern, with a few exceptions on that start time. We are just now starting a Clash of Kings, and we're having a blast with it, so come join us or listen to the episodes afterwards. All right, thank you to... we'll give a shout-out to the dearly departed Lord Mark of House Joseph, of the Snow and Winterfell, writer of Mazlacartho, the white dragon with green scales, horns, wings, and talons. Our peers of the realm include the mysterious BR, Hand of the King, Lord Stephen Stark, titles, Hand of Queen Ashea, who is known as the Best, Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire blog is Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsdale the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Cabeth the Unfrozen is Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light, Defender of the Old Gods and Warden of the North. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington is Lady of the Villa Hills and Crescent Springs, Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle is King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, Commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet, led by the flagship Caraxes, and the Bloodstone Fleet, led by flagship Prince Daemon. His ships were apparently contacted to try and hunt for Arya Stark as she crossed from Westeros to Essos, but they supposedly saw, but decided to let her pass anyway. Yeah, way to take the money and run, guys. Good job. King Beyond the Wall, Sidney Jesse, the Fallborn, Lord of Bluespring and the Haunted Forest, wields a dagger of dragonglass, and the Valyrian steel blade of Red Frost would never stoop to handing over Bran Stark to the others. No. He might take him himself for ransom, but you got to ask him.
Ransom from who?
Good question.
Just not the others?
Yeah, ransom from the Boltons? No, he wouldn't give him over to the Boltons either. He's not that kind of King Beyond the Wall. He's more of the Mance Rayder type. Lady Sarah Connolly the Willful says wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. She is Jenny's patron. Our White Walker patrons include Araya Flint of the Mountain Flints, captured by the Weeper, only to be raised in the Valley of the Milkwater. Blue Eyes and Golden Memories. Alexander Greyblood is first of the first men, now crowned in ice, called Silencebringer, Woods Blinder, and the Snow of Night, wielder of the Iceforged Greatsword Pale Frost. Our small council includes Lord Daniel the Sneaky Russian, Master of Ships, Grand Maester Via James, Lord Benjen of House Hornwood, Master of Laws, Lord Fabian Flowers, the Bastard of Greenshield, Master of Coin, and Lord Johan is of House Orcos. He's called Shadowhawk, and he is our Master of Whispers. Lords and ladies in their castles include Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron, Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell, Breaker of the Second Stone. Gregor the Toasty is Lord of the Bread Fort. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Ashlyn Winter is the Hawk's Eye, Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance. The Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is wielder of the Valyrian Steel Machete Everglazed. Lord Alistair Whitaker is Lord of the Dawnhold. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is Guardian Ranger of the hidden 100-acre Werewood, dual wielder of the Valyrian short swords Glorious Morning and Little Light Wise, and sharpshooter of the Werewood and Ironwood laminated longbow Todd Von Oben. He has really made me good at talking because that's
I was honestly about to interrupt you just to give you a pat on the back for that tongue twister. It was really good.
Why, thank you. The Bastard of the Wolf's Wood is first forester of the old gods, sworn to House Ironwood. Listen for the silence. Lady Lana Kelly of Wolf Island is protectress of the Steelhold. Casey Stark is of House Acres. Lady Kay of House Archer is Lady of Earthdog Hall, Huntress of the Wolfswood, and Guardian of Maddie Squirrelsbane, the mighty Direweenie. Lady Raywin of House Dillsdane is the Star Spear. Peter Rivers is the Pale Dragon and heir to Bloodraven. Lady Carolyn Carey of Castle Stone Sharp whose horse is shod in Valyrian steel, Lady Rider of the Rising Hills. And Lord Brendan Lannister is the Bloodlion, ruler of Castle Everroar. King's Justice Sir Troy the Steady is wielder of the Valyrian steel blade Fate. Do you want to do your Queenside Council share? Or do you not have that pulled up?
I have it pulled up, and I would like to.
Go
but
ahead.
first, I'd like to think about the idea of a horse shod in Valyrian steel.
That's kind of cool, right?
Like, what does that do? I'm very curious. What abilities that allows the horse to have, or if it's more of a statement about how damn rich you are.
I think it's a little both because, the horse shows that maybe a little lighter. The horse maybe would move a little faster. It's like anyone who's ever
extra sturdy on like climbing all sorts of things.
Yeah, maybe the tracks would be more distinct. I don't know. Change them less often.
Anyways, that's what I was contemplating. All right, the Queen's High Council. Bloody Ben Blackwood, Master of Whispers. Rebea Stareyes, Lady of Waves and Mistress of Ships. Captain of the Iron Shadowcat. In the shadows we bear our claws. Katrin the Wise of House Trondheim, Master of Coin. Grand Maester Elizabeth, middle daughter of Lyanna Mormont, First Lady to forge both the silver and Valyrian steel link. And Laura Boros, the Lady of Infinity, Master of Laws, and person who makes me look corrupt.
Yes, sure. She won the free ticket,
Master of
the drawing.
Laws.
Yeah, never. How did she win? Our Kingsguard is led by Lord Commander Miriam R., backed up by Sir Glennon of House Leanne, called Lion Cloak, longest tenured white sword. Sir Dean the White is Knight of the Black Star. Sir Jord of House Pepsi is the Beverage Knight. Gregor Snow, called Snow Bear, is a Bastard of Winterfell. Sir Jen Seaworth is Knight of the Southern Snows, and Lisa is Water Witch of Dorne.
House Pepsi.
This is Atlanta, home of Coke, Sean's beverage of the day, so we got a fight on our hands. The Beverage Knight is ready to fight, though. He's always ready. Queensguard.
Lord Captain Commander Haema Helmont, the Sellsword Sentinel. Alexander of House Atreides, from the seat of Dune. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Ser Rambo, Knight of House Gannon, First Blood. Ser Leon of House Walker, wielder of the twin Valyrian steel blades, Fire and Ice, and the Werewood bow, Rain. Amber the Adamant, the Knight of the Mist, and Mother of Squids. The Wintry Wolverine, we finish what you begin. And Nora Nico. Did you ask, Aziz?
How to say it? I'm not sure, Nora Nico or Nora Neko.
Either way, those are two new members of the Queen's Guard.
Right on.
And you guys don't want to know what happened to the last members. It was a bloody attack.
And our Beard Guard that Sean will read.
By the way, this list of all our patrons. This
Yeah.
is available for people to look at, right?
Yeah, you could go to historyofwesteros.com/supporters to see this list. It's
Have
a
you
public list. Yeah.
never been to our website, Sean?
Well, I have, of course, but
No, I don't believe you. I think you've never been to our website.
but I really just want to point out the artwork that Suzanne did here for House
Yeah,
Beard and Hand of the Beard. I love it so much. So Lord Commander George the Golden, Sir Joshua Oakhart the White Oak, Lady Rita of the Coppermane, the Unbound, Dance the Fervor.
Hi, Rita.
Sir Joff, Warden of the AC, wielder of Triad, the multifaceted beard of platinum, red, and brown, Stay Frosty. And Sir Tim Corgyle, Mad Boy of the Western Desert.
Right on. Thank you to the Beard Guard, the Queen's Guard, the King's Guard, and all the other folks who support History of Westeros. Last but not least, the HOW Knights Watch, which is led by Lord Commander Benjen Umber, the Silent Giant, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Greatsword Winter's Kiss, and backed up by First Builder Maegor Snow, a.k.a. Maegor the Cool, the Fire in the Snow, and First Ranger Sir Source Delica of House Gramercy. That's it, everybody. Hope to see you all, like I said, for our Sunday Valar Readus episodes and for future Saturday live streams. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time. Valar Reread Us.